We have had a question on Twitter, so I will start off with that, and then we'll make sure that we get the microphone to you. So please stick up your hands, and we'll find you out in the audience. So the first question that we had come through was from Steve Wilson, and regarding the Internet of Things and the challenge of security. So he said, "We can't even protect credit cards today. What is the paradigm shift you can foresee for the security in the Internet of Things?" And right on cue, Andy, there you go.
Oh, no, get me so what was the question? I was too busy looking for a microphone.
If we can't secure credit cards today, how are we expected to deliver security in the Internet of Things?
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting question. I mean, as an American especially, as you can tell by my accent, traveling around the world with an American credit card is like an exercise in apology. We don't have chip and PIN. Every time I go to a service station or a restaurant or something, I'm apologising for my credit card, right? But here in Europe, in a lot of places, we're starting to get these secure credit cards. That's starting to work, but we're still seeing huge data breaches. As I presented in my session, one 8-digit password caused a $61 million data breach at Target. That doesn't mean we can't start fresh and do the right thing with the Internet of Things. When we see the interface to the Internet of Things, to all of the devices, the sensors all around the world that are going to be on the Internet of Things, the API security, obviously we're heavily involved with that, but starting fresh and having that security mindset. This is something I see over and over and over again with startups and younger developers who haven't grown up with this security mindset. So having the right people who know what they need to do, and don't do things like Snapchat that opened up their back-end cloud API on the basis that they would be the only mobile client that would try and access it, right? Have that security built in from the very start. It's going to be a challenge, though. There's no doubt about that. And Gert, I know you've talked about the ability to use the Internet of Things as a botnet. There's going to be a lot of things go wrong before they go right, I think.
Yeah, basically, I think when everything becomes connected, people, devices, all kinds of things becoming connected, then it means that we have to have standards of security, not just technical, but also political, ethical standards, which we don't have at all. So, who's allowed to do what with information, who can swap with who, all of that is sort of up in the air now, right? So we need technical solutions, we're going to need military-grade type solutions. I mean, there are estimates saying that 50% of all military spending will go towards cyber warfare and security in the very near future, right? Because that's basically, all of that stuff can be used for evil intent, right? So lots of things have to happen there, but we're also going to need some sort of standard, not just a technical standard, but also a standard of, permissions. For example, there's lots of parallels between surveillance, NSA type surveillance, and marketing, right? You use the same information, basically, right? So that needs to be looked at. So there's a technical part, there's the ethical part, there's a political part, and I think all software companies will be quite active in this turf to figure this out, how to actually make this work.
Do we have any questions from the audience at the moment? Oh, it's taking a while to get warmed up. All right, well, we'll keep going up here, but do please raise your hand and get involved in part of the conversation. It's interesting that you mentioned legislation and what governments can do. Andy, you spoke about the fact that things are real when governments start to legislate. I guess the challenge is, though, can they actually keep up? Can governments actually create this legislation, create almost the social and moral fabric that you were talking about, Gerd, in terms of actually what's required to make all of this possible and available?
Well, certainly from the superannuation, being the superannuation industry, that you could argue, had certainly had some way to go in maturing as as IT organisations. The ATO, although I was sort of taking a bit of a pun around delivery out of them before, has really done an amazing thing in uplifting through this superstream legislation the whole superannuation industry. A lot of people would walk in with their contributions to our offices with cash and an envelope, and they still do that, right? And so I think that's a really, really good example of the government being able to lead with some very sophisticated B2B technologies, AS4, and these things are hardly used in the rest of the world, let let alone here, and has been able to lead that and really drive the efficiency and a much better outcome for superannuation members and employers.
And just to add to that, if you follow American politics at all, you might have seen the debacle that was healthcare.gov, the Obamacare implementation of the healthcare exchanges in the US. And it took them 18 months with a waterfall development using a bunch of different partners to build a website that failed incredibly well. Then they brought in a lot of newer technology vendors. They actually went to Silicon Valley. They actually came to CA Technologies as well. And it took them about a month to rebuild that website in a way that spectacularly succeeded. So it's going to take, I think, occasionally a short, sharp shock to government to get them to do the right things and do them in the right ways. But I think they're absolutely capable. I mean, we meet with government people all the time. They are some of the smartest, brightest people that we meet with, but the institution of government often holds them back. And so having that shock to the system that lets the experts be great, I think governments certainly can keep up if they dedicate themselves to that.
Yeah, I think certainly the challenge is that technology does not have a built-in business plan for ethics. Technology is technology just is, right? So the question of saying is technology good or bad is basically answered by saying, well, it just is, right? It just develops, right? and it gets better. Right? But technology is not going to solve the problems that it creates. And so you see all the big tech companies are doing two things now. They're trying to get better with their stuff, and then they're trying to invent things that deals with the consequences of their stuff, right? And that is what we need, because, and this is where the government comes in. If the governments don't understand what this means, we're going to be in deep trouble, right? And we're looking at exponential technology and linear government, that needs to be looked at for sure.
I think you'd also add to that, it's around that behavioural change that I was talking about before. So not only does the consumer, are you trying to change the consumer's behaviour, but you're trying to also leverage up government's behaviour as well. You're trying to change the way that they view the past as the past, but that's the way it always gets done, so we can't change how we work. What we're really seeing at the moment, especially in probably not so much the very large departments, although health is probably one that is changing quite significantly, the way that it's trying to operate, but certainly in those sort of the mid-tier government sectors, about trying to change not only the way that their consumers behave or the way that they act with the data that they have, but also about their own internal processes or approaches and thought processes to what's possible. Because once they legislate it, we can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a look at the US Digital Playbook. It was released by the US government about 2 weeks ago, and it's a real sort of call to arms for all of the government departments in the US. So,
yeah.
Cool, thank you. I think we have our first taker in the audience as well, so welcome. Over to you.
Hi, my name is Jay. I work for Accenture. The question is fairly simple. The information that is available on the internet today is to a large extent filtered. For example, if I go to Google and ask or type in God, I will get different results from the person sitting right next to me. That, in my head, is an intrusion of privacy. What do we do about that? Even on Facebook, if I look at someone's posts on a regular basis, I will only see their posts. I'll not really get to see what my other friends are doing. So that, I don't know, that in my head is still a problem. How do we face that problem?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a big challenge, marketing and money comes into it, and how things are filtered and presented to us. And I think that balance between the usefulness of things and the monetisation of them will continue to be a big battle.
It's also the corporatisation of data as well. When you're doing that search, you're using an organisation search. You're not roaming the internet trying to find it. So there are going to be constraints when you use an organisation's way of working, but just as one car drives differently to another car, I think there's always going to be pluses and minuses to any service that we use. I think we should also observe the miracle of having that information available to you, but also then the positivity about what's possible next. So whilst it may be viewed as a privacy concern now by yourself, I think it might also be an opportunity to maybe tap into a market that isn't explored yet.
Yeah, I think this is probably the whole debate about humanizing technology versus technologizing humans. Our technology just isn't smart enough for that yet. You know, we don't know how to account for mistakes and for serendipity, for discovery, for accidents. You know, the systems don't support that because it's logic, right? So there's a whole new bunch of technology coming in, artificial intelligence primarily, that will account for some of these things. And that's a huge area of growth. You know, the thing you see right now, of course, is that you can protect yourself against those things by logging out, for example, right? or by using simple technology like Tor or others. You know, you can do that, but it's very geeky. So we're still at the very beginning of this. You know, I think that's a huge bunch of new opportunities are arising from the concept of saying we have great technology, but we have to make it actually human, right? So that we don't have to be machines to use it. Right? And this will be a vast opportunity in software, right? Humanizing technology.
Cool. Thank you for the opening question. We have one down the front here now.
Hi, Sam. I have a question for the futurist, Joe, maybe. You know, all things connected, and yet we're in an imperfect world. For example, you know, we're struggling with integrations. You use Lisa to build all the virtualization to help you do testings, and lots spinning around the integration, and yet we're saying things are connected. Right, so I can see the contradict between the two worlds. Yet we want to be connected, at the same time we're struggling to be integrated. Do you see any breakthrough in technology in the future where we stop inventing standards? Maybe we focus on something, or maybe a quick win and not investing anymore that doesn't return in a short time frame.
I'm not sure I quite understood all of this, but I'll try. You know, I think that the you know, we're still in baby steps as far as technology is concerned, right? So technology is now so cool and so addictive that we're always using it, right? So we're basically, because it's so new, we're really getting into using it all the time, and, you know, having the mobile phone around all the time and getting really kind of addicted to it, right? But I think what's happening is that eventually this becomes just like air or like water. You know, we don't drink water all day just because we have it, right? We eventually find a way to find a balance. So you will see there's already a backlash movement, you know, basically going offline and disconnecting. That's already all happening. I mean, Google is receiving every month twice as many requests for being filtered out as it received the month before. So offline is a new luxury, right? Everybody knows that. You know, being offline is exciting because, you know, you're not disturbed. This is the opposite of what it used to be. So what we need to do is just find a way to balance this. It's not an either-or question, right? You cannot exist, really, without being connected eventually, right? You can, but you have to move to Amish land, you know, to somewhere, or the jungles of Switzerland, you know, or the mountains, rather. But, you know, eventually we have to find a compromise between those two things. You know, what is the machine, what is the human? How do we actually interact, you know? And that is in the future. And I think every software company in the world needs to figure this out. Because if using software makes us be the software, right, then what's the point, right? At least not much of a point, I don't think.
Thank you.
So as far as, you know, what steps, what big technologies might be coming, you know, I think we've had a huge step forward, you know, in the Internet of Things and the connectivity. I think the challenge now is trying to get the technology solutions in place to meet this challenge. And I don't think there's any one thing there that will do it. There's a series of pieces that we've probably already been working with for a little while now that will get us there. But you know, the challenge is quite great, and the amount of change that's occurring. But I think we're really catching up. More than I see a piece of technology suddenly jumping us forward. It's that we're already there, and we've got to catch up with that.
And I think that's true in I think that's true in life. You have a look. 25 years ago, the portable phone came out, and it's changed our life. It's changing our life. It's also changed itself. It's had to become more relevant over time. It wasn't just enough to talk to someone. Now you had to be able to get it information. You had to be able to use it as an all device. And even now, phones, they got smaller, now they're getting bigger. And it's as an example of relevance, you know. So the moving phone enabled us to be connected And now the next thing that comes up might enable us to be slightly less connected, as you were saying before, but it might be about being information rich but time poor. So we might be things about what we can stream, not just what we can actually use. So it's all about what's relevant to the market at that particular point in time, and it'll be a number of things that'll rise and fall over the course of our lifetime and beyond.
One more quick comment on this. I think the question of technology used to be, until about 2 years ago, whether we can do something or how we can do something. That was a primary question. So the whole NSA thing didn't come out of thin air. It was possible to do it, technically speaking, so it was done, right? So the question is basically no longer whether we can do something, because the answer is almost always going to be yes. You know, can you grow an artificial ear? Yes. You know, can you print a liver? Sooner or later, yes. Right? The answer will be yes. So we have to ask a different question and say, why should we do this? You know, why should we make a photo of our dinner and put it on Instagram? You know, I think that's interesting, but the question is why. And of course, when it gets more serious, like the Internet of Things, you know, who and when and why? Right? I mean, those are the real questions. So it's not about how; it's about that's gone, right? Basically, how is solved. We can actually do that, right? So the question is why. For example, if we're using the Internet of Things and we're connecting 100 billion devices to each other, then the question is, right? How do we run this? And who runs it? Who gets to do something? It's not a question of whether we can do something. So we will never have the Internet of Things if we don't solve that problem, because it'll be a vast time bomb otherwise. Right? I mean, you can only imagine basically killing every single IT system in the world by not having some sort of organized way of doing this. Right? That's mandatory.
Cool. We have time for a few more questions because we don't want to eat into lunchtime too much. Please.
My name is Pamela Gray, and I'm probably one of the few people in the world, few lawyers in the world who has a PhD in legal knowledge engineering. My comment about the Internet of Everything as a lawyer and a legal knowledge engineer is that we always have a precedent in law, and the precedent to probably start with is how do we prove paternity? And we now can do that through genetic analysis. And if we look at the individuality of everything on the Internet of Everything, how do we show the individuality of each thing in the Internet of Everything? Now, I think that this is probably complicated by the invention of the 3D printer, because the question becomes, is the second copy the same as the first? But if we set aside the problem of the 3D printer, we would be looking at going to some sort of individual identity to do with nanotechnology, so that what is the nano identity of each thing on the Internet of Everything? And that might be an acceptable way of framing a law.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, the ability to identify what devices are connecting. If we're talking about, you know, billions of devices connecting, what is each device? It's really interesting when you look at browser footprints, for example, or fingerprints. You don't need to log into a website for them to know exactly who you are. Just about every browser has a fairly unique kind of fingerprint, a combination of the fonts installed on your system, the browser you're using, the updates, the patches you've got, the cookies that are installed. You know, there is actually the ability to identify and even to track people across the internet, even if they don't tell you who they are. Now, I think the upside is with the Internet of Things, if we do it right, the things will tell us who they are. Self-identify. There's lots of different architectures. I would definitely recommend you look at, for example, Cisco's architecture for the Internet of Things, whether you aggregate locally and then process data locally and then send it out for usage, whether you send all the data up to the cloud and then process it up there. But all of this while, if you're doing it properly, you're going to identify every single device, determine what sort of access level in and out that has, and that's all going to be managed through the APIs. I don't know that it's a solved problem yet. We're still going to see a lot of vulnerabilities come out, but I think it's the technology is not so much the problem as much as the implementation of that technology.
Yeah, you know, I think it's important to remember that we're talking about an ecosystem here, right? We're talking about something that is not controlled by one entity like Microsoft used to, 20 years, whenever that was, whoever they are. But now we have an ecosystem, right? We're interdependent. And this makes it more difficult, right? But it's more like a biosphere. You know, when you go out to the mountains, you don't have a central entity that runs everything. It's like an API, like a giant API, right? So it's basically an ecosystem, and that's what we have to figure out. You know, what are the rules of that ecosystem? How do we make it complete? How do we keep it running? And that's really what we're facing now. You know, so if you're looking at large, successful companies like Amazon or like Google, they have built ecosystems, right? They're becoming more centralized, but they're still an ecosystem. Right? So it's very important to keep in mind how that will, in the future, you know, work together.
Cool. Was there any final question from the audience? One right in the middle down there, Suze. Thank you. While we're getting the microphone to you, one thing did come through on Twitter from GovGirl regarding the Internet of Things, asking, do I really want to know which cow actually delivered the milk that I drank this morning? So, you know, and I think that's a question of why would you want to know that as well?
I mean, and that's actually really interesting because, and I'll give you a very real example of why you would want to know BSE, right? Certainly in America, the bovine spondylolisthesis, I can't remember, the mad cow disease. Cows from Canada had it, but apparently in the US they didn't. So the US government said, but you could track individual cattle to their source of origin and the field they were in, and so you could identify whether certain meat was safe to eat. So maybe to identify whether certain milk is safe to drink, or even if you're just interested in the whole farm-to-table concept. So I think it probably is useful.
There you go, the Internet of Cows is real.
Cows.
Yeah, I'm Michael Hannard. I work for Hewlett-Packard. My observation in all of this, and I've been in IT for too many years now, but we're facing another deindustrialization. Some of the statistics you gave us earlier on were showing how many job roles will disappear: receptionists, lawyers, restaurateurs, bartenders. As these jobs disappeared, then those people aren't going to fill the 60% of jobs that haven't appeared yet. Where's the money going to come from to buy all these services, to buy these goods that are being produced cheaply, all right, but automated as well? Who's going to pay for that? And we're seeing a lot of social unrest in Europe right now with people, because people aren't working. If people aren't working, they've got nothing to do. If people are losing jobs, and guys of 18 or girls of 18, 19-year-old at the moment now can't get a job as a bartender in a couple of years' time, and a lot of them do, where are they going to get the money from to pay for all of this? That's my big worry at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Gerd take most of this, but I will say we no longer have a need for buggy whip manufacturers, and that's a good thing. We're okay with that. But societies go through dynamic change. You look at the Rust Belt in America, where I am at the moment. You're around Detroit. You know, you can buy a house for like $100 in Detroit in the suburbs because no one wants it, because there's no work there, because the American steelworks industry has gone through huge decline. Meanwhile, in Silicon Valley, there's a huge amount of wealth being created. But you look at something like Twitter, which is worth billions of dollars, and it employs like 120 people. So there are fundamental changes, but I know there are other roles coming on that don't exist today, which are going to start to fill up at least those gaps.
Yeah, there's one book that addresses this very nicely. It's a guy named Jeremy Rifkin, R-I-F-K-I-N, and he has a book called The Zero Marginal Cost Society. It sounds very geeky, but it's actually very simply explained. It's the same thing that happens to music or films when we can make easy copies and send it anywhere around the world. It's going to happen to cups and shoes, and when we can do 3D printing. Right? It's basically, everything becomes essentially zero cost of distribution. Right? And that's going to happen across the board with anything that can be virtualized, really. So that will cost a lot of jobs and so on, but in the end, there's sort of a new economy forming around this. Right? And this new economy includes entirely new jobs that we haven't seen, like privacy managers, for example, or people who deal with artificial intelligence, or people who are dealing with making the staff more creative, more human, right? And there's all these jobs that we have never really seen that are starting to form. But needless to say, 30 million taxi drivers aren't going to become computer designers, So that is a social issue that we're going to be facing, what we do with structural unemployment, what's called technological unemployment. But that's 20 or 30 years away, so it's not like we have time to prep. Lots of bright people in the room.
All right, terrific. I think we'll draw the panel session to a close. Thank you again, gentlemen, for your insights and thoughts today.